Hello, friends and folks, and welcome back to Neutral Game, your newbie-friendly fighting game podcast. I'm Six Detmar from Scanlane Media.
And I am Miodrag or Real Soviet Bear. Hello.
And we're here this week, I always start with this week. We're here this time to talk about Mortal Kombat 11. First time we've covered one of the Mortal Kombat games on this show. Actually, any Netherrealm game, like in specific. And I feel like we got a lot to talk about with this one.
Yeah, this is going to be a bit of a chunky episode. Mostly because there's a lot of stuff in the actual game to talk about. So, yeah, let's get the ball rolling.
First and foremost, it's interesting to be here talking with you about Mortal Kombat when I feel like the first major argument we ever had was about Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, it was about Mortal Kombat 9 and whether it was a real fighting game or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and though I certainly think my stance was a little too harsh, there's a part of what I was thinking back then that I still think, which is I don't like the way defense works in Mortal Kombat, but we'll get to that. This is the first Mortal Kombat game I've given any real attention. I played a little bit of like 3 in arcades. I probably played a ROM of 1 at some point, but I never really got into Mortal Kombat, partially because of my distaste for them in general. And so this was the first time I was like, you know what, let's give it a real shot. Let's stop being so, certain about our opinions before we even let it speak for itself. So this is my first real Mortal Kombat experience. What about you?
So I played 2 and 3 as a kid, mostly 3, and I played 4 when it was out. And if playing Mortal Kombat Special Forces or Shaolin Monks counts, because those aren't really fighting games, but there's...
Of course it does.
Okay.
No, it totally counts.
Okay. Didn't play anything until Armageddon. And then I played Mortal Kombat 9, and I played a bunch of Mortal Kombat 9. I was really into that one. Played 10, didn't like it. Played Injustice, didn't like it. Skipped Injustice 2, and I was kind of gonna skip Mortal Kombat 11 based on my experiences with 10, but we agreed to take a look at it, so I had to.
Mm-hmm. I did actually also play some Injustice. Not a bunch, but I did play some.
The only good thing about Injustice was that you could press circle to fire an arrow, like a single button projectile. That was the best part of Injustice.
There were some moves. There are some times when NetherRealm does stuff that I like. I like how I can't use the term meaty because that means something in fighting games, but I like the way they sell some of the moves. Like I played the general dude from Superman's planet. What's his name?
Zod.
Yeah, I played Zod, and like a lot of his moves, just like through animation and through like effects, they just sold them really well. It felt really good to play. He'd grab you and push you to your knees, and then just laser you in the eyes and yell "kneel before Zod," and that felt good. Yeah. The presentation has always been a strong suit of theirs.
Yeah. The presentation, like visual and audio, has always been good. I think I played the Green Arrow in Injustice, but I just could not get into it.
Mm-hmm. So, on a fundamental level, how would you describe the way Mortal Kombat 11 plays?
Mortal Kombat 11 is a 2D fighting game with 3D fighting game controls sometimes, and sometimes it's 2D fighting game controls, and it's like a weird blend of the two.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a block button.
Yeah, that's one of the big things. I feel like this entry specifically also has some like mechanics around like fatal blow, which is like it's like a fatal counter in like a Blaze Blue, but like you can only do it once per match, and it's like circumstantial. It's weird.
It's an iteration of their X-ray moves. So 9 and 10 had X-ray moves where if you had a full meter, you could use it to perform literally the same type of move that Fatal Blow is. But this time around they changed it so that you only have Fatal Blow stock when you're low on health, and you only consume that stock if the hit actually connects, not like if it whiffs or it's blocked.
Oh, you're right. I'm mixing up Fatal Blow with the other mechanic, which I don't know the name of, which is like sometimes you get like X-ray hits.
Oh, that's
which is once per.
That's Crushing Blow.
Crushing Blow. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. My mistake.
Yeah.
There's also the Crushing Blow mechanic. Yeah. Once per match, you can get a special counter hit that does extra damage and does the X-ray effect usually.
Yeah, that one's. I guess we might be getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but like that one's a bit weird because it's automated and it's tied to specific moves, but you can also set it to be manual, so that it doesn't actually trigger when you use moves unless you're holding down the move button. So for example, like an uppercut, I think on most characters is a Crushing Blow, and eventually, if you keep uppercutting, one of those uppercuts is going to be a Crushing Blow instead of a regular uppercut. But if you set it to be manual, it'll only happen if you do the uppercut and you're holding down the punch button.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the other interesting thing is the way they handle like meters in this game, where you have sort of like two different. Well, of course, you have your health meter, but you have like a sort of an offensive meter, and then you have. It's not quite right to call it a defensive meter because it's also used for object interactions. But like basically, you have two stocks that you can burn for EX moves, and you have two stocks you can burn for like defensive stuff, and they regenerate over time. You don't have to like do stuff to get them back.
There are also some interactions that burn both meters. Can't remember off the top of my head which ones, but I know that like if you do a wake up attack, I think that burns both meters, and if you do like a wake up roll, that burns both meters. And then, like, depending on how can I say this, how important the move you're using is, like, it'll either take one stock out of 1 meter, two stock out of 1 meter, one stock out of 2 meters, or two stock out of both meters.
Mm-hmm. And then, it's got a system of combos, which is based on, basically it's like target combos from, like, a Street Fighter or something is how most of the combos work. You have different sort of like preset combinations that you combine, and then special moves that you throw in there.
Yeah. The special moves are usually like standard issue Mortal Kombat inputs, but they're not standard issue fighting game inputs. And I think we can go into that a bit more in depth later when we talk about some other aspects of controlling the game. But just to give an example, by default, a fireball isn't like a quarter circle motion forward. It's down, then forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's if it's a lot of this stuff is like, hey, if you're used to Mortal Kombat, it's Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
But if you're not used to Mortal Kombat, it controls very differently from most other 2D fighters.
And also, I should probably say, like, in case you aren't familiar with what target combos are in Street Fighter, how combos work in Mortal Kombat 11 are essentially you have a preset list of inputs. Like, let's say you have, like, square, circle, triangle. And even though, like, square is a punch, circle is a kick, and triangle is a punch, the kick and the triangle in that combo are unique to that combo usually. Like, you don't have it's not like Arc System Works fighting games where you're combining individual moves into a combo. It's more like, hey, this is a string, and in this string this is how this particular button behaves. It's more closer to like Tekken, say, or 3D fighters in general, really.
So how in general, like, playing the game, how did you feel about the gameplay and the systems?
It's very clunky in my regard, but like I don't mean like, oh, the game itself is clunky. It means more like I feel the game flows in a way that if you're playing it as it's intended to be played, it flows really well. But if you're not doing the things it expects you to do, it doesn't. So for example, let's say like you're playing Tekken and you like press a bunch of buttons. Usually they'll like connect in some coherent string. But in Mortal Kombat, if you press a button sequence that's not an actual combo, the character will like maybe do a punch or whatever the first button is and then just stare. Like there's no real flow to it in that regard, like a visual flow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also stuff like, hey, you need to burn meter to do a wake up move, but you can't actually do any other like move as a wake up. So, for example, if you have like a special that's a backflip, like Johnny Cage has a backflip, you can't actually use that backflip on wake up. It's more like Johnny has to stand up, get back into like neutral standing position, and then he can do the backflip. But if you do the wake ups as they expect you to do, like if you burn meter, then he doesn't move as he is standing up. So it's like it flows really well when you're actually using the systems, but if you're not using the systems or you misinput something, it just goes to a stop. It's not like even like a weird whiff. It's just like your character staring a lot of the time.
Yeah, it feels like there's not a lot of wiggle room. It's like they have as you say, they have a specific way they want you to play, and if you don't adhere to that style, they just don't have any give for you.
Yeah, and it feels like in order to make the game more challenging, what they do is they make the inputs really tight. So to do a combo, like it's not like there's not a lot of wiggle room. Like there's no like, oh, I'm gonna see if my first move is gonna connect, and if I see it hits, I'm gonna input all the rest of the string. Or I'm gonna see like if the first two moves hits, then I'm gonna input the rest of the string. It's more like, no, just input the entire string. You have to. Before you even know whether it's gonna hit or not, because otherwise it's not gonna execute the entire string. And it has like other things that are like super tight, like it has a flawless block mechanic, which rather than being like what I'm used to in games, which is block at the earliest or at the latest possible moment, but it gives you like a few frames wiggle room. This one seems to be literally block as the move is connecting. So if you're, for example, used to Garo or blocking, instant blocking in Guilty Gear, this is even tighter than that. And then to top it all off, there is a unique follow-up from the flawless block, which is, I think, up triangle or up X. And then if you flawless block and you do the follow-up, then you do like a weird reversal. But it is so difficult to execute. Like, I genuinely could not pull it off. I think only once in tutorial. That was the only time I could pull it off. It is ridiculously difficult. So I think what they do is, because the actual individual strings aren't that difficult to pull off, it's just like a button sequence and, the character does his thing, or her thing. They kind of try to emphasize, okay, we want precision then. Like, we can't give you, like, complicated air juggle combos like Blaze Blue has, for example, or Guilty Gear, or whatever. So they kind of go on the precision instead.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of the game, like, this is kind of true of all NetherRealm games that I've seen, at least, since Mortal Kombat 9, which is most of my experience is seeing since then. But these games are really zoning heavy. Like, everyone has a projectile, usually a pretty fast projectile. Some people have multiple projectiles. And it feels like there's a lot of, like, taking a step and blocking and taking a step and blocking. And then also, this is the classic argument we've had, and again, my stance is less severe than it used to be, but I feel like, so obviously by adding a block button instead of back to block, you're eliminating the possibility of cross-ups, and, I used to just say, okay, that's a bad thing, and now my stance is, okay, well then what are you making up? Like, you're making this element of the game more simple, what are you doing to compensate? And to me, it doesn't feel like very much. I feel like there are a lot of instances in this game of, like, two characters, like, doing, like, a 2 or 3 move block string, and then the other person does their block string, and the other person does their block string, and then someone messes up the timing and starts their block string too early, and they get punished. And that's just, like, the flow of matches feels like a lot of back and forth in this way that's really unsatisfying to me.
Yeah, so I didn't get, like, I didn't learn to play the game, like, super well with my time with it, but I tried to spend, like, 2 weeks with it at least. But from what I have seen from matches and when I've talked to people who did go a bit more in-depth into it, it does seem to be exchange very safe and very short strings until it eventually hits. And then when it hits, then Because like I did say, you have scripted combos, but how it also does work is, let's say you launch somebody in the air at the end of your combo. If you're positioned properly as they are falling, you can juggle them into a new combo that is like a different string. So it's not like Mortal Kombat 3, which is literally just input the combo and that's it. That's the only thing you can do. You can position yourself and then re-juggle somebody with another sequence of combos. So that's what I usually see people doing, like when they're playing on a higher level. It's like, keep doing safe small combos, like that don't leave you open until that safe combo goes through, and then when it goes through, then yeah, like just let loose with the proper combo.
Yeah, and like, I mean, it's a different style, and I don't know if it's fair of me to say that's like bad necessarily, but I don't find it very interesting compared to like spacing based footsies or like cross ups and setups and such. It feels like the game just doesn't lean into that very much, and I find it kind of tedious.
I think the part that irks me there, because in theory you could use this to describe most fighting games. Oh, you keep doing safe strings until you actually get something through. And then you capitalize on that. But how it works in this one is, because within a string, you don't necessarily pick the height of the move. So let's say, for example, like, okay, you have square, circle, triangle, and the circle is a kick. Whether that kick is high, low, mid, or overhead depends on the individual string. So it's not like, say, when you're playing Tekken, and you consciously have the move go hit low or something like that. It's more just like it depends on the property of the string. So because of that, a lot about the learning the game is very matchup heavy. Like if you're fighting somebody and you don't know the matchup, and they don't know the matchup, like they don't know like how to fight against you. It's basically whoever's like faster in inputting the combos, because like I played like I don't know, against the collector, and I couldn't figure out whether something was high or low. And it's just, okay, I know all of my moves, but because I don't know how to fight against him and I don't know his moves, he keeps like getting his combos in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the other thing is, I feel like, I don't know, that it's one of the things that is interesting that the block button does allow them to do is they can have some like somewhat more dynamic, at least visually, kits in a way that like other games wouldn't allow for. Like Scorpion has his like cross-up teleport. In other fighting games, it would be broken how fast you switch sides and hit them in the back, but with holding down a block button, that doesn't really matter because there's no concept of cross-ups. So there is, to a certain degree, they can add some extra mobility to the game that isn't a problem, and I think that is interesting.
I love that you use that example, because if I'm remembering correctly, Injustice 1 was back to block, and the first DLC character they added was Scorpion, with his full, not the first DLC, but one of the MK Cameo DLC they added was Scorpion, and that included his teleport kit. And when he released, it was impossible to deal with him because nobody was equipped in the game to deal with that. I think he was actually the first character with a teleport.
Yeah, well, he wasn't. He was the first one with a cross-up teleport like that. And then like later on, they also added Batgirl, who had a tracking instant overhead teleport. That if you meter burn, just gave you a free combo. Injustice to me showed that Netherrealm has a real problem, like kind of needs block button because they don't know how to design for back to block is what Injustice made me think.
Yeah, no, definitely. But that showed that a lot of the moves in Mortal Kombat do revolve around that block button, which is kind of sad because they used to have a run button in Mortal Kombat 3 and they didn't keep that because it was dumb. So I don't know. I don't necessarily like block buttons in 2D games.
I'm not a fan either. And as I said before, like I feel like you could do something cool with it. And at least presentationally, they sometimes do. But I feel like on the mind games end, they don't really make up for that, in a way that I find interesting. So. But one of the things they lean into a lot with this particular entry, they definitely started it with Mortal Kombat 10, but they have a lot of character customization stuff going on here.
Yep. Both visual and gameplay related. And somehow both tie and feed into each other. But yeah, basically, I think they started the heavy visual customization with Injustice 2. And I haven't played Injustice 2, but from what I recall, it had like RPG stat scaling, like you could play, casual matches online and have this ridiculously buffed character with level up gear. They kind of stepped back from that in this one. There's still ways to upgrade your gear, but I think it's only for single player modes. I don't think it actually activates in any online mode.
Right.
And how it works is essentially each character has a skin, and they have 3 slots for gear, and that gear is individual to the character. So like Kung Lao has his, I don't know, hat, and I don't know what else. Shao Kahn has his helmet, spear, and hammer.
Hammer?
Yeah. And as you win more with those items equipped, you get XP, and then on XP milestones you get a gem slot, and then in that gem slot you can slot individual gems of that shape for that character. So let's say you have a flame shape slot on the Shao Kahn helmet, you can slot any flame shaped Shao Kahn gem that's meant for the Shao Kahn helmet into it, and that has like very small stat boosts, like, I don't know, more meter gain or things like that.
This is one of the few times where I'm willing to be just like really decisive. The gen system sucks.
It is. It's really boring.
It's boring, it's tedious, and it just like it doesn't add interesting customization at all. Like you just add like, percentage changes, and they don't affect online game modes, which they shouldn't. But then it's also like, okay, why are these even here? I just think they're annoying.
They're there for Towers of Time, and yeah, we can get into that a bit more later. And I'll explain more the gem system. But yeah, it's very micro. Like it's like very small, minute changes, and a lot of grinding and playing involved. But yeah, that's the visual stuff, and then you can do things like equip a unique intro, unlock brutalities, unlock taunts, things like that. So it's mostly like just visual stuff, visual fluff. And then with the mechanical stuff, so the big thing is the loadouts, but they don't work like loads in Mortal Kombat X. So in Mortal Kombat X, you would pick a character, and then you would have 3 variants of that character. They kind of took a new step with this one, and I think, again, I'm not sure, I think this is based on Injustice 2, but how
it is, yeah.
But how it works is, you have 3 empty slots, and in those 3 empty slots, you can place 3 slots worth of moves. Some moves are like powerful enough to warrant 2 slots, but in general it's like 1 slot per move. And these moves are in addition to the base moves of your character. So if you were to strip a character of any custom moves, they'd still have a almost full skill set. And these are, I think, almost exclusively special moves. It's not like combos or normal moves or anything like that. It's just literally, okay, Shao Kahn now has a hammer throw or a command grab, or can buff his weapon, things like that. And how it works is you have 2 tournament legal loadouts that you can use in ranked, and that I think Netherrealm expects you to be able to use in tournaments. And I think that is the part where the system kind of just stops being interesting.
Yeah, it feels like they really split the uprights between Mortal Kombat X and Injustice 2, where they have this like, okay, you can customize your loadout, but if you're playing a ranked or a tournament, you have to use one of these pre-built ones. And I think they had 3 options in Mortal Kombat X for each character.
Yes.
You only have 2 tournament legal ones here.
Yes.
And at least, I mean, like, I didn't play Mortal Kombat X at all, so maybe I would have felt this way about X as well. But I look at like characters that I like, and I look at their tournament legal customizations, and I'm like, these customizations suck.
Yeah. I was playing Shao Kahn, and I could not pick a set that I liked. It's more like, oh, this set is obviously better than the other set, but it also has the summon wizard to buff my hammer, which is a super useless move that I do not like. And I want to put something else in there, but I can't because it's not tournament or ranked legal. And it's really frustrating because I don't know why they would do that. It's because, okay, the theory is, if you could mix and match moves, then you would find a broken combination, and that would be too powerful. But the issue with that is you have two sets, and from what I've seen online, and from what I've seen by playing myself, it's usually not as loadout, different. It's not like Mortal Kombat X, where, this is better against that, and that's better than this. It's literally now, no, this one is straight up better. Out of these two, you're just going to use this one. There's no point in using the other one. And I feel it also just limits the strategy in the game. I think it would have been far more interesting if, you just let people use whatever loadouts they wanted, whether custom or pre-made, because there's a ton of, non-tournament legal pre-made ones. And I've even seen, even Sonic Fox, on Twitter, I think during the beta said, this is, really weird. You should just let people make their own loadouts.
And also, not to be too rude about this, but, if it's a balance concern, you can adjust the game on the fly, and it's not like your games are balanced anyway. Currently, the consensus is that Scorpion does not have any bad matchups. He just doesn't have any. It's their games are not very well balanced to begin with. It's weird to suddenly care about that when it comes to adding a bunch of content to your game and then not allowing people to use it. Because there are a lot of moves that are customizable that are not represented in either set.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is a perception thing. I think because no other fighting game does this. What you do usually have is isms at best in fighting games, whether it's Marvel or Street Fighter or whatever. You don't usually have fighting games that let you customize your moves that much. The most I can think of is Skullgirls letting you pick the assist that you want, which move the assist should be.
Sure.
But in general, you don't really have that. So I think they were worried, and I think they just just decided, this sounds like it will be too powerful, let's not do it. Or it sounds like it would be too powerful, let's not do it. And I think if you were to ask a casual player, or just somebody who just has who is not super into fighting games, do you think this would be too powerful to just pick any moves you want? I think the first instinct would usually be, that sounds like it would be powerful. But I don't think it actually is. With all the moves they have that you can pick from, it seems like it wouldn't really break the game that much.
I mean, there are a few instances I can think of. There's, I think his name is Garrus, the new character who's the Time Titan. One of his moves, which takes up 2 slots, is the ability to cancel any normal.
Yeah.
And if you could add any other move with that, it's that's already a problem.
Yeah, but then just, if that becomes a problem, then just make that a 3-slot thing.
Sure.
There's your balance issue. They already limit how many moves you can slot.
That's true. I think just tweaking the slot values and stuff, and yeah, I think you're right there.
They also even have compatibility things even if so on top of the slot limits, you have some moves that will straight up say, hey, if you pick this special move, you're not allowed to pick this other special move. So they even go that deep into how much you can mix and match.
And usually it's because they share an input, but
yeah,
not always.
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting with as far as character customization is the control options. I do appreciate the breadth of options where they have as you mentioned before, you can switch the inputs to be more like Street Fighter style. They have a toggle for negative edge, which I don't think has ever come up on this podcast before. So the idea of negative edge is basically you can hold down, if you want to do a fireball, you don't have to do quarter circle punch. You can hold down punch, do quarter circle, and then let go of punch. And that's a negative edge, is letting go of the button to trigger it. But I will say for all their options, the block button combined with a number of moves you have, the controls just feel strange on stick no matter what I've configured.
Yeah, I've also tried to rebind them on my gamepad, and the first thing I did was, okay, I want my interact button here, I want my block button here, and things like that. The problem is, because the fatal blow is a specific button combination, but it's like a specific button combination of the shoulder buttons, aka the interact, stance switch, and whatnot. My fatal blow ended up being L1 R2, which was really unwieldy to actually do, so I gave up and just used default controls, because that's what I have to deal with. And I thought it was really weird, because usually how these things work are, here are the base buttons, like, you know, the face buttons of a game like A, B, C, D, and then all the other functions are combinations of A, B, C, and D. But in this game, you know, the only thing that's actually a button combination, I think, is the throw, but it never tells you that, like, square and X is throw as well. It just tells you here's a throw button. But, like, stance is its own button, block is its own button, so you can't really do that much.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, this game is if you wanted to use a stick, it feels like you'd need a button on the side of the joystick for block. It feels that kind of like that's the only solution that I could come up with.
I mean, have you ever seen a Mortal Kombat 2 cabinet?
I don't know if I have. It's been a very long time.
So it's essentially 4 like buttons next to each other, and then the block button is off where your thumb would be on your right hand. It's just like all out of the way.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't play on stick, but another friend who also plays all fighting games on stick complained about the same issues you had. It's just very weird to play and takes a lot of getting used to.
Yeah. Yeah, and you get there, but like, I mean, you know, I didn't, for a while I was not changing the controls, and block on R3, or R2, on a stick, it's like, your fingers are way the far away from anything you actually want to do.
Yeah.
But as far as teaching you these mechanics and these controls, they have a tutorial that I've been told is the best tutorial ever to be in a fighting game. That's what reporting says.
Oh, okay. I was wondering whether you'd bring that up. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't like generally talking bad stuff about the game journals or outlets, and I'm not gonna name anything. But there was one from a mainstream outlet that said, yeah, Mortal Kombat has one of the best tutorials out there, or the best tutorial out there in any fighting game, which I think just shows how specialized fighting games are as a genre, and how lacking dedicated writers are for them. Because even like when you have dedicated writers on some more focused sites, it's more with a like fan tone rather than a game journalist. And like even here we talk about it like fairly loose.
And also, even here, we're a fighting game specialty podcast, and we have been called out for not knowing enough about Garo.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
You know.
So it's difficult to cover everything, but yeah, in terms of just looking, like, let's just look at contemporary fighting games. I'd say like Mortal Kombat delivers on the bare minimum for the core mechanics, at least.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it's a weird. It's one of those phrases that's dead to language. I shouldn't even use it. But it's a strange mixed bag, because I feel like there are some features of this tutorial that are legitimately groundbreaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you'll have one that's like, okay, do this string, and it'll show like okay, here's the input, and you'll hit it in and you'll do it wrong, and a thing will pop up and say like, you hit X too late, or it'll be like, oh, you hit triangle, but you were a little too far away, and it gives you pretty accurate, very specific information on like, this is where you went wrong. I've never seen a fighting game do that before, and it's so useful.
Yeah, it is very useful. I also really liked how they explained the jailing concept. I don't recall a fighting game ever doing that. And in general, they cover everything about the core mechanics. The only issue, which you mentioned on Twitter, was that there is no repetition in the tutorials. aka, as soon as you do the task at hand, it shoots you to the next lesson and doesn't let you repeat it or anything. Whereas in most tutorials, like for fighting games, you want something like, oh, do this 3 or 4 or 5 times and then it'll advance you.
Right, so it has all the information, but it feels like it doesn't actually teach you anything, because like, you do it once and it's like, okay, move on to the next, and you very often it's like, oh, I did that by accident, or like, oh, I really don't have that timing down. It's like, nope, you're done, move on. It's like, okay, I don't feel like I actually learned.
Yeah.
And then the other problem I had was the character-specific tutorials are this weird mix of information overload and not enough information, where like you fire up a move and it says like, okay, this move is a low, high, low, it's safe on block, but like careful, it's got some really bad whiff punish, and you're like, okay, that's a lot of information before even showing me this move. And then it doesn't tell you how to use anything. Like, I feel like you fire up Blaze Blue, and like the first thing it does, it's like, okay, Ragna the Blood Edge is like a close, like zoning pressure character who wants to chip away at people's health with like blood sucking moves, right? This game never tells you what your character is supposed to do.
Yeah, it doesn't explain the game plan. There's no idea how you're actually meant to play the character. Unless you're meant to play every character the same way, which I doubt.
And the other thing is, their tutorial is only for the base set of moves. There is no character tutorial, there's nothing to teach you the variations or the moves that the variations have.
Yeah, and it feels like this could have benefited a lot with a command training mode because of all the strings it has, and just let you input every string at least once, like a combo challenge or whatever. Yeah, the character-specific tutorial is very bare bones, and also in some cases actually just broken, because they might have fixed it by now, but when I played, I was like, oh, I wonder how the collector plays, and I tried to do this tutorial where...
You had this issue too?
Yeah, where you try to do I try to do something and cancel it, and it's not letting me cancel it, and it's not working. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look at the demonstration, and then the AI fails it.
Yeah.
I've had that happen,
Yeah.
I think 2 or 3 times at least. Like, once in the regular systems tutorial, and I had twice with character-specific ones.
Huh. Yeah, no, I thought I was like, I must have done something weird to this game, because, yeah, but it's like, no, this AI is not showing me how to do this, actually.
Yeah, I had one where it was, I think it was something very, like, super basic. It was like, do a sweep, but it disables your movement so that you can only do attacks, like you can't, like, move up or backwards or forwards. And then I kept trying to do the sweep, but I kept it kept being too far away, like a pixel away. And then I'm like, okay, what's wrong here? And the tutorial did reset like my position, so it's not like I'm misaligned or anything. So I tried the demonstration, and then the AI is missing it as well. So I had to do moves that lunged me forward until I was close enough to do a sweep, so I could actually advance in the tutorial.
Weird.
Yeah, it has some issues. I'm assuming those are just bugs. I've seen the same happen in Blaze Blue and Guilty Gear when they patch in some characters that they don't update the combo tutorials. But yeah, it was really weird and not exactly a good look.
Sure, but I'm sure they'll fix it.
Yeah.
So how did you feel about the story mode? That's one of the things that, especially with these Netherrealm games, like everybody flaunts the story mode as being like, this is the real reason to play these games. This is the best thing in fighting games.
I think the story mode is probably the part I enjoyed the most. I think consistently Netherrealm has good single player main stories, at least. It was the same in Armageddon. It was the same in Mortal Kombat 9, 10, Injustice 1. Like, they are so consistently good that even though I'm not interested in playing Injustice, I might buy it on a sale at some point just to finish the story, and that's it. They're pretty good in that regard. I don't know how they managed to pull it off, like, whether because they're published by Warner Bros., they just have better access to writers, or their in-house writers are just that good, but it's very well put together. It's interesting. And they have you switch up a lot of characters. I really like what they changed in 11. So this is the first time they let you pick one of 2 characters in a bunch of fights. I thought that was really nice, and I think it flows really well because whoever you pick says something else to the other person, so it like contextualizes why he would be the one to fight and not the other person, and it's pretty nice. Overall, I'd say I wouldn't call it the gold standard because it is so high production value that I cannot imagine most other fighting game devs actually doing it.
Yeah, this is one of those things that I feel like there's. I think you did some tweeting about this, but there's this problem that games have where, like, if one game in a genre does something really well, then it's like, okay, every other game in the genre has to do it too. And it's like, you only have so many resources. Like, they put a lot of resources into their story mode, and it shows. It's really good. It's pretty fun. It's an engaging, campy story. But, like, those resources did not go other places. And so it's like you have to have a focus.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. Like for some smaller things, like when we say, oh, okay, like it would be nice if the tutorial let you repeat moves and things like that. Those are like very small things that you could have picked up from competitive games. But when you talk about something that's like 5 hours of content, fully voiced, fully animated, that's a really like big thing to do. Like even Guilty Gear had like what, a 6-hour anime for a story mode.
Yeah.
Like I imagine that was also ridiculously expensive to do, and it was still cheaper than Mortal Kombat's probably.
But I will say the characters in Guilty Gear didn't have an alarming number of teeth. It's not that they have too many teeth, it's that I'm not used to seeing characters rendered with like the correct number of teeth, and it just freaks me out.
To be fair, visually speaking, Mortal Kombat or Netherrealm always releases like really good looking stuff as like for the time. That's kind of like the weird thing about like Guilty Gear. XR still looks really good right now, or let's say like even Blaze Blue like looks pretty good right now. But if you go to Mortal Kombat 9, it doesn't look good. But at the time, it looked really good when it released, and the same was true for Mortal Kombat X. So it's just they go, because they release a new game every 2 years. It's just in their benefit to have modern day super high quality graphics as opposed to stylized long term graphics, because they're not going to support Mortal Kombat 11 for 4 years like Japanese fighting game devs do.
Sure. Also, since you brought up Mortal Kombat 9, I will briefly mention I tried Mortal Kombat 9 story mode years after people cared about it, and the AI in that can be really rough. It can be really unfair. This game's story mode does not have that problem. I gave up on Mortal Kombat 9 story because I had a fight with, I think, like Ermac, where every time I let go of the block button, he would do an hit scan full screen projectile that was a command throw. The AI in this story mode is way more fair. You're just going to be able to get through the game.
Yeah, in this one, the only difficult fight is the very final fight. And in Mortal Kombat 10, I think there were a few fights that were kind of rough. And then in 9, it was like, God, I still remember like 3 major speed bumps in that entire game. And there were probably more. Because it was just something that you would like bang your head against for an hour.
Yeah. So a lot more forgiving. And I'm totally like, I don't know, maybe it's just the old school in me, but like I think the final boss should be kind of bullshit. That's healthy for a fighting game.
The only thing I didn't like, I'm gonna try to say this with no spoilers, the only thing I didn't like about the bullshit boss fight is that it gave you 2 different endings depending on how well you played.
Really?
Yeah. If you lose a round, you get the bad ending. If you don't lose any round, you get the good ending.
Huh.
Yeah, that's the only reason why I was so upset, because I had to beat it without losing a round.
I didn't realize. Did I get the good ending or the bad ending? I think I got the good ending.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, I'm not gonna spoil it, but yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get a custom game over if you lose the final boss.
Yeah, that I got a couple times.
Yeah.
While we're on the subject of single player content, there's a whole wealth of it here in Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat traditionally has all this support. So you've got the Towers of Time, you've got the Crypt, you've got the AI battles returning from some previous games where you customize your own AI. And as I mentioned, we've got like the gems and the gear, and there's so much to do.
I think the AI battles are from Injustice 2, at least in the form they are now, because I don't remember that being a thing in X.
Okay.
Crypt has been kinda a staple, so The weird thing about the crypt right now is how big it's gotten, because in Mortal Kombat Armageddon, the crypt was just this menu-based thing, and you just go and click menus and like open chests, give me loot. But the main story mode in Armageddon was actually a beat 'em up mode where you travel the world of Mortal Kombat and you fight a bunch of goons, Tekken 4 style. And then you have big fights with big name characters. And then they remove that in 9, obviously. But then in 10, they stopped making the crypt menu-based, and instead it became this Legend of Grimrock style first-person dungeon crawler with jump scares. So it was kind of like this over-glorified menu. And now the crypt is this over-glorified item-based adventure game that seems very impressive when you compare it to previous scripts, and seems really underwhelming when you compare it to Mortal Kombat Armageddon's adventure mode. Because it's kind of like between there.
And also seems really underwhelming once you spend a little time in it and you're like, wait, there's nothing, like, there's the initial shock of like, well, wow, I'm running around Shao Kahn's island and like, oh, I found... or Shang Tsung's island, and I found Shao Kahn's hammer, and I can use it to smash down walls, and like, oh, there's all this stuff, and like, I'm running around, and then you're like, wait, I just have this huge empty area full of chests for me to open, and sometimes I smash down a wall so I can open another chest. Does the running around actually add anything?
Oh boy, you didn't even scratch the surface. Okay, I'm gonna explain this to you now. I explained this.
No, yeah, because I got really bored of it really fast.
Okay, so I had to explain this to my colleagues, and it's so like the scope of this is ridiculous, and I'm not sure if it's in a good way. So it's an item-based adventure game in terms of that items gauge your progress. So when you have the hammer, you can break down walls, as you say. Eventually, you find the spear from Scorpion, and you can use that spear to access new items by pulling them down from heights or by activating specific triggers that enable you to access certain chests. Then you find Kenshin's Blindfold, and Kenshin's Blindfold lets you see invisible items in the world, but also it lets you see invisible, like, spectral broken walls. So like you go to an actual wall and then you put on the blindfold and it turns out, oh, it's a spectral wall, it's actually broken, so you hit it with a hammer while you have the blindfold on, and then it opens a new path. Eventually you also find other things that let you access the green nodes, things like that. And you also have item-based, like key item-based progression. It's like, oh, this door needs a specific item, and then you have to find that item in the crypt or in the Towers of Time to access a certain door, which then gives you access to certain other chests.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Does this feel like an adventure game where you're going around, like, you know, figuring out like combinations and stuff and solving like puzzles, or does this feel like Resident Evil with no enemies and just a bunch of like diamond keys?
Oh, you can die in this mode. It's just that the dying doesn't do anything. There are enemies, but all the enemies are jump scares. It's really ridiculous. And there are traps as well. Yeah, and when it kills you, it just respawns you immediately. It only kills you to mock you as a jump scare, because they had jump scares in Mortal Kombat 10 script, so in order to keep the jump scares here, they made them actually enemies. So for example, when you put up the blindfold, there's a random chance that a spectral entity will spawn and kill you. And it's random. It's nothing else. So it's really, it's essentially, so I worked on hidden object games, and for those who don't know, hidden object games are essentially first-person adventure games like LucasArts style, and where you rub items against items and try to figure stuff out. The crypt is really obtuse. Like, you can find a lot of key items on your own, but for most part, you need a guide to look things up and figure it out. And a lot of the chests, like, the base chests are randomized, but you have the Shao Kahn chests, which are the ones with like Shao Kahn's head, and then you have to hit them with a hammer, and then you spend green souls on them. Those are fixed. So what my theory in all of this is, they made the crypt super information dependent, aka I need to go and ask my friend, hey, did you figure this out? I don't know how to do it. But because of the breadth of content there's way too much stuff. So what you do is you need to consult the internet. Like, you need to find guides, you need to ask Reddit, you need to go to forums, to Twitter, things like that. My theory is they made this so information dense and dependent so that people would keep Googling and talking and searching and writing about it. Like when you play, like when you read your daily articles and somebody writes, oh, how to find the 3 new snowmen in Fortnite's latest update, stuff like that.
Sure.
So I think this is what they were going for. They want this post-release buzz to improve search engine optimization and stuff like that, which is what a lot of games do. And that's why I find playing the Crypt miserable, because I have to have a guide open on the other screen, because there's no fucking way I can figure out a lot of these things.
Well, and also, I mean, Mortal Kombat has had a long history with, like, hidden information.
Yes.
I mean, like, you've got the fatalities, which they didn't list, and you had to look up, and then it was like, oh, there's a new, like, they made a version update, and they changed all the fatalities, so you'd have to look them up again. It's a, do we say proud tradition of how Mortal Kombat has hidden information and expected you to go to the community.
I mean,
so
it makes sense. Like it makes sense that you're trying to recreate the arcade rumor mill and the magazine rumor mill, and the only way you can really do that with the internet is just having, enough information that eventually, 1,000 monkeys with typewriters will figure out the solutions to. But also, it's really annoying to play because you run out of money so fucking fast.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many chests, and it's so hard, like, there's no indication how many chests you've opened or how many chests you've seen in an area. Like, there's this map that just tells you where you are, but it's useless. Like, it doesn't tell you which chests they are, which, like, blockers there are. Like, it would be really useful to, have a Metroid-style map that just goes, oh, like, this needs a key item, you can't go through this door, and then I'm kind of like, okay, I found this key, now where the fuck is that door? Like, you can't remember. So I think it could have been done more elegantly, and I think I would have appreciated more, like, they had this update because everybody complained about how expensive the crypt was. They had this update where they gave everybody 500,000 coins. Those 500,000 coins were enough for me to open 1.5 areas in the crypt.
How generous.
It is like, and because a lot of the stuff is randomized, it's like hard to find specific headgear you want. And it's, by the way, now I know like what a normal person would be thinking, and what I thought was, oh, they're making this really obtuse and difficult because they want me to pay real money to get the fancy Kung Lao hat. They don't even do that. Like, if you go to the store, you have premium currency, and you can buy items that are usually normally unlockable in the game. But the items you can buy, there's like 8 of them or something like that in the store, and they rotate, they're on a timer. So it doesn't even have the decency to let me go in a menu and say, just let me fucking pay $5 for this dumb hat. It's like you have to wait on rotation, so you don't even spend money, like real world money on it reliably. It's really weird. I don't understand it.
Well, I assume I've heard this theory elsewhere, so I'm kind of parroting, but I feel like it's part and parcel with their approach to the crypt, right? Where they're trying to keep it in the conversation. They don't want you to get everything, and they don't want you to just like, okay, I'm going to go into the crypt and unlock everything and never think about it again. They want it to be a reason for you to keep coming back to the game.
But it's not a fun reason to come back to the game. That's the worst part about it.
Well, yeah, they kind of whiffed on that one.
So this combined with Towers of Time, and we can move now to Towers of Time, I guess. I don't think the quality of the content is that engaging. I don't feel like I'm having fun opening these chests or exploring this island or climbing up these Towers of Time. Like, usually what's fun for me is like, okay, I play the story mode, I know what everybody's into now. I might do some combo challenges, I might not. I'm just gonna go back and, play the fighting game. That's how usually I play fighting games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the towers are. I don't know. It's not an idea I've ever been a huge fan of. Is these like sort of like survival modes with like weird like wrenches thrown in the works here and there, weird gimmicks. But like I've had fun with them before. Soul Calibur's done ones where I've had a good time sometimes. But yeah, it feels like I don't know. Most of the like the complications I run into in the tower are just things that are annoying to deal with.
Towers of Time just looks like a worse World of Light to be honest. Because World of Light, I haven't played it, but I watched streams of it. A lot of the fights in World of Light are, here are the rules of this fight. Like, it's usually modifiers that affect both you and the opponent. It's not exclusively just the opponent, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
In this one, it's mostly like, oh, the enemy is just harder. Like, he has random freezes, random missiles, assists, regens health, ridiculous stuff, does a lot of damage, just ridiculous stuff like that. And it's just, oh, we're modifying the fight to make it harder rather than we're modifying the fight to make it more interesting. Which is really weird because they had in Mortal Kombat 9, they had Test Your Luck, which is a lot of goofy fun, and I'm really annoyed that Towers of Time isn't that. Because in Test Your Luck, you would play it, and then one of the roulette wheels would say, oh, you're gonna fight this, both of you are gonna fight this fight without arms, and then you can't do anything that relies on having arms. Including special moves. Like, that's funny because it affects both you and the opponent, and this one is just miserable.
Mm-hmm. But then there are consumables you can use to sort of to give yourself the advantage back and cancel out all these negative effects.
See, that the consumables are an example of how much content this game has that's completely, like, boring. I'm sorry to say like that, but like, if when you look at the consumables, there are so many of them. Like, yeah. I opened the list of consumables. Okay, I'm going to use a consumable. And the recommended consumable is always the healing crystal, which I don't have. So I'm like, okay, what other consumables can I equip? And there's just so many. And they do the same dumb thing. It's like, summon an arm, summon a rocket, summon a fire rocket, summon a fan. It's like, okay, I have 30 items on my list. I cannot parse all of this. I'm just gonna play the fight. And do you know how I play Towers of Time? What was the most efficient way to play it?
I actually do.
Yeah, I just had the AI do it. Because you can go into the AI and make a loadout, and then there's a special tab which is just AI, where you define the characters, like whether he's going to be rush down or combo heavy or zoning, and you have 60 points and you can allocate it in each stat up to 30. So I went online and looked at the most broken builds I could find, and I literally just said, just play for me. I can't be bothered because the AI is going to play better than me, and I'm just going to have him play and watch Netflix on my other monitor. That's my 90% of my Tower of Time interaction.
So what this then becomes is a gacha game where you never unlock new characters, just costumes.
Yeah, I mean, it tells you what you unlock on some of the towers, but it's still like so. It's frustrating because you need to finish the Towers of Time to unlock cosmetics because the cosmetics are exclusive to modes, but it's so miserable to play. Like, it is genuinely miserable to play. There was this one fight I tried where I couldn't finish a combo because I would just get randomly frozen. That was the modifier. You get randomly frozen. And that's not challenging, that's just frustrating. Like, nobody likes playing against Sub-Zero, so why are you making me get hit by Sub-Zero while not fighting Sub-Zero every time? That's ridiculous.
Imagine if you had to fight Sub-Zero while randomly getting frozen. You pretty much wouldn't get to play.
Yeah. And how the Towers of Time, we didn't mention this, but how they are structured is like also in a way where the game wants you to keep coming back, and that's, you have this main story tower, right? That's like the main island. And then you have an island which is character specific. So you spend coins to summon a tower that is for a character, and then you get exclusive unlocks for just that character. And I think there are like 3 towers a pop. Except those are gated by dumb shit like, oh, you need to spell this many gallons of blood while playing that character, you need to perform this many fatalities with that character, and stuff like that. And then there's a boss tower that's on a timer there is a event tower that's like on a 3-day timer, I think. And then there are like smaller towers that are like a few hours each and just rotate out. And then the final tower is, you need to find a special key item in the crypt or in the Towers of Time, and then you use the key item, and then you summon a tower, and then you have this many hours to complete that tower. So again, there's a ton of stuff everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I guess there's also the AI battles. Have you tried those?
I didn't even bother.
So the AI battles is you set up your team, and your team is the defending team. If anybody ever attacks you, that's your AI team that they're gonna like defend you. And what you do is you make an attacking team, and then you go to a list of players, and then you pick a player that has a non-optimized build, and you attack that player, or rather, you initiate an attack. Then your AI fights that player to a best of 3. You can speed. That's the one you can speed up though, so you can like speed it up at 8 times. But you have to do it.
Oh, great!
You have to do it because there are exclusive AI battle unlocks, and now that one is like a gotcha because once you've completed a AI fight, it gives you random items. There's no rhyme or reason to them. It just gives you random items. So yeah, so all in all, I think there's a lot of like content here. Like I think if you were to put it on the back of a box, you could say hundreds of hours of content and you would be saying the truth. But I think, especially compared to the story mode, it is so painfully tedious and so painfully boring. It is not actually, at least to me, fun to play.
Yeah, the content isn't worth experiencing.
No. And it has, and the metagame for something like a fighting game is so ridiculous. And I think, like, as soon as you have a game that feels more optimal to have the AI play instead of you, like, that's really bad. But also,
yeah,
it would actually be worse if they didn't let me have the AI play for me, because the Towers of Time gets so difficult that I don't think I could do it alone. So I don't know what's worse.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I don't know. The netcode's pretty good.
Yeah, we played. It passed our netcode test of is it as good as BlazBlue, and I feel it was. We didn't really have any issues.
Mm-hmm.
And again, for those who don't know, it's California versus Sweden, so it's pretty far.
Yeah, so we're pretty good at testing netcode, just sort of naturally.
Yeah.
Pretty massive distance there. I haven't had very much fun playing online, but that's mostly just because I don't like playing the game. It's not really the netcode's fault.
Yeah, So, one thing I will say... So I agree with you. I don't really enjoy playing this game, and I feel like saying, the net play is bad is a bit disingenuous because I don't like the core fighting of it, so obviously I'm not going to like fighting against randos online. One thing I generally don't like is that rank is best of 5. I don't think there's a reason for it to be best of 5. Especially because some of the rounds can last really, really long. And I think that's about it. I played mostly just online lobby with you, and I played random ranked. It plays fine. There's no lag. It seems to have all the modes in place. I saw a bunch of tournament modes, lobby modes, practice modes. You can even play AI battles with a friend, aka you can basically do Mortal Kombat Pokemon with your friend.
Yeah, maybe we should do that. Maybe we should just
just sit down and yell at our okay, Shao Kahn, use Annihilation.
We could run we could have a stream, the chillest stream in the world, where we basically just did Mortal Kombat 11 Salty Bet.
I mean, you could do that. You could. The game gives you all the tools to do that.
Well, so. I feel like we've been kind of negative so far, but it's time for me to get really and truly negative.
Mm-hmm.
Because part of me being willing to talk about this game on a podcast is going to talk about Netherrealm and the decisions they've made. first and foremost is the one we've mentioned before, right? Which is Sonya Blade is voiced by Ronda Rousey, Sandy Hook, Truther, and Turf, and domestic abuser, and all-around piece of shit.
Also bad actress. If that wasn't all enough.
Also bad actress.
Like, her voice acting is so bad. It's so bad compared to everybody else. It's so jarring every time I hear her into story mode. It's really bad.
She has the exact same, like... I really genuinely believe that she was reading her script into a microphone, like, backstage at a wrestling event. Just, like, with no context or anything. She'd just be like... Give me a break. How am I supposed to fight like this? All right, are we good? We good. It's like it's so bad. Her performance is so flat, and just anytime she's on screen, it takes the air out of the room.
Yeah, it's I think we already went over this on the last podcast, but yeah, it's really jarring to have her. It's really like it's really also weird to have her, like to have somebody that's like so problematic when they've kind of improved the general design direction of the cast in the game. You know, like visually at least. Like, so it's kind of weird that, like, it just seems like a Warner Bros. Decision. Like, it doesn't make any sense to be like, I don't think any developer there would have gone like, oh yeah, let's add her.
And be that as it may, though, it is in the game, and your money is going to support a turf. So I totally respect anyone who's like, yeah, fuck that.
Yeah.
And I wish we could just leave it at that, but NetherRealm in the wake of this has had some of its developers speaking out. There have been reports of like just an overwhelming culture of oppressive crunch at NetherRealm, and like just overtime and workplace abuse, which is obviously upsetting.
Yeah.
And then also there's a Kotaku article which was an anonymous interview because the person was worried about finding another job, which is entirely understandable, of a person who had worked on basically like the art and fatalities for Mortal Kombat 11, who met with a psychiatrist and was diagnosed with PTSD because of their work, which basically involved like looking at like grotesque pictures of like torn up bodies and like mutilations all day so that they could better model Sub-Zero's guts.
Yeah. So I want to back up a little bit because I kind of want to talk more about this. As someone who works in the games industry and has been exposed to some of this shit, so in general, crunch is viewed as a failure of management, aka crunch is, hey, we thought we'd be done by this date, but because of things that happen or because we planned poorly, we won't be done by this date. Ergo, everybody has to work harder. Or has to work overtime. From what I've read from the reports, how they operated at Netherrealm was they included crunch in the initial planning. So it would be like, okay, we need to release the game by this point, so we're gonna have this much content, and to do that, like, we're gonna start crunching on this date and then end crunching on this date. So it's part of the initial planning, which is frankly ludicrous and just like boggles my mind, like even more than regular crunch. And regular crunch is massive bullshit. And how they seem to actually like get away with that stuff is because they're the only AAA game dev in Chicago. I'm guessing there's some casual mobile studios in Chicago as well, but they're the only AAA thing, and that's what prospective young people go for. I will say is like a lot of people ask like, should I boycott the game if it was produced under these kind of conditions? And there's really no correct answer to that, because in one way you're saying, if you buy it, I don't care how this was made with the blood, sweat, and tears, I'm just gonna buy it because I care about my fun. But on the other hand, what you're gonna do is also like people who work their asses off and who want people to enjoy the thing, because you're not gonna work ridiculous overtime just for the pay. You obviously care what people think about the game and your work in it. But then if those people you wanna impress and enrich their lives say, I'm not playing this because of how much you worked on it, then that also sends a really weird message to people. So there's no real good answer to that. I just say as like, my personal take is just buy the games you want to buy, but also when you see these kind of practices, just call them out and say you don't want them, because egos are fragile, and when a lot of people gang up on a dev and the media gangs up on a dev, they feel the need to defend themselves even if they're rolling in cash. So it just keep calling out these bad practices, and eventually they'll get slightly better. Like, there's been a lot of talk in the industry this year specifically about it, and like last year as well. And like Epic and other developers, how crunch is ludicrous. So, keep talking about it. That's the best I can say. As far as the trauma or PTSD from people working on fatalities, that's been a thing since Mortal Kombat 9. Like, I remember reading an article post Mortal Kombat 9 on Gamasutra about it. And I'm kind of glad it's mentioned again, because I feel like a lot of people glossed over that fact when it was initially mentioned as a problem, and now in the context of everything else, with worker rights being a hot topic in game dev, I feel like, yeah, we should probably bring this up again, because you either need better support or better management or better compensation or something for that, because that is gruesome work.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up stuff. And obviously it's not exclusive to Mortal Kombat either. You have like people working on horror games who are like, hey, I spend 12 hours a day staring at dead babies. It's like, okay, yeah, that would be upsetting.
Yeah, I don't even want to know what people who worked on Dead Space or the Resident Evil remake had to like research. Like, it's pretty gruesome stuff. And you want it to be authentic. And you're kind of like, oh, but it doesn't look that bad in the game because you're desensitized from it, but that's still like fictional violence. What people usually use to reference is like actual real world violence. Like, seeing actual real world images of something is far more traumatic than seeing it in an actual video game.
Right. And the other thing I wanted to mention real quickly on the subject of like whether you should or should not buy the game, the other thing to consider is like this stuff doesn't, like, the way these systems are built, if you don't buy a game because you're trying to send a message, I mean, like, that's you go with your gut. I think you need to be the one to make that decision, but understand that the way these studios are structured, it's not the people who made these decisions are going to suffer. It's the rank and file who are going to get laid off, who are going to get shown the boot, who are going to get screwed over before management ever is.
Yeah, there's like a horrible systemic problem in the games industry, and it's usually, like you said, like if the studio starts like doing badly, like let's say a mass boycott of Mortal Kombat 11 would work out, I think top management would just have like a nice safety net and do what the fuck ever. It would be mostly like regular people being laid off. And again, this is all tied to a lot of complicated issues. I think it's just, and we're kind of like almost like I guess, like, I'm sorry, like, we're going a bit out of the realm of regular fighting games podcast, but I feel like if either of us care about something in particular here, I think we should tell that to listeners.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also think as like, I mean, you do what you want with your money and your time, but we're at a point as like earnest fans of video games where we can no longer pretend that these games are made by fucking elves in Santa's workshop, right? These are made by real people, and we have to care what happened to those people.
Yeah, like, it's, I don't feel like any, like if they didn't have the crypt, or if they didn't have the Towers of Time, or if the fatalities weren't as gruesome or whatever, I don't feel like this would be a worse game. Like, this is especially true for fighting games, because like fighting games in general are carried by their main core mechanic. It's very rare for, like a fighting game to have shitty gameplay, but hey, people are gonna play it because the hat customization is nice. Like, that's very rare. So especially like here, it's kind of like ridiculous. I don't think that like working less would have made this game any worse. But also, yeah, like if we want more fighting games in the future, because what happens is you have this chain reaction of, okay, Mortal Kombat does this, and that's viewed as the best way to do things, and then other fighting game developers try to do something at the same pace to compete with it, and they can't manage it, and we have less games because companies burn out, people abandon the industry or whatever. So This is more like, hey, is it like it's not really worth it to, have extra polish and shine if we are denying ourselves better stuff in the future by alienating or running people out.
Totally. Yeah. So you wanna wrap things up? Like, where do you end on Mortal Kombat 11?
Okay, so I want to make clear that a lot of things we discussed here are a lot of tied to personal preference, and I don't think we ever made it sound any different from that. Like, we're not some authority on how fighting games should be made. So,
I mean, I am, but
yeah, you may be, but I'm not yet. I need a few more years. But I think that if you do not usually like fighting games, or you don't like contemporary fighting games, Mortal Kombat could be different enough that you might actually enjoy it. I know that there are some people that hop between different fighting games, like I don't know, like Sonic Fox's main fighting game is Mortal Kombat, and he plays like everything. But like, I personally do not like it. I don't think it flows as well. I think the story mode is really good. And according to the DLC leaks, if they're true, like, it looks like the characters will be fun as well. So I think there's a lot of like good in it. But at the end of the day, I feel like the amount of time the game asks of me, both in terms of playing it to understand like matchups and my own character, and both in terms of like out of game stuff like the Crypt and the Towers of Time, I feel like it has the same issue as Mortal Kombat 10, where it just wants all of my time. It doesn't want me to play anything else. And I feel like my time is much better spent elsewhere in some other fighting game. And like, I was even worried, like, oh, am I just like bad at learning new fighting games again? But then we did like our stream recently where we played 4 games I had barely touched or never touched, and I got into that much easier than anything else, like than Mortal Kombat. So, yeah, I'd say, like, if you don't like most fighting games, Mortal Kombat might be something you enjoy. If you're more into anime fighters or 3D fighters or, like, Street Fighter, you might not like it. At the end of the day, there's a lot of stuff to keep you busy if you want to play solo or just mess around with friends. But even if you want to mess around with friends, I always say, like, Tekken or Dead Alive just looks better to mess around in.
For my money, this is a game that I feel like feels worse the more time you spend with it. So like, there are people out there are people who've messaged me who are like, hey, should I get like Super Smash Bros. Just to play single player and then put it down? And I'm like, I don't know if that's worth your money, personally. Like, if that's how you play fighting games, if you're a person who's like, I want to play the story mode and then I'm good, this is actually a great one for that. This is an amazing story mode. It's a great time. But if you're here to get really in-depth with a fighting game and really like make it your new thing, I don't know that I can recommend this.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we can go ahead and take it to our outro here. Miodrag, where can people find you upon this internet?
So you can find me streaming on twitch.tv/RealSovietBear. I stream 4 days a week and various different things, full playthroughs, fighting games, retro stuff, the works. You can also find me on twitter.com/mdkii, that's MDK Roman numerals 2. If you want to follow me ranting about stuff before we actually record a podcast, for like a little preview. And other than that, I also have a Discord, which you can find the link to on my Twitter and on my Twitch page, where there's a dedicated fighting game channel and a lot of nice folks if you want to hang out.
Yeah, it's definitely a good place to hang out if you just want some casual fighting game chat with people who are pretty open-minded and have tried more fighting games than you probably know exist. It's a good retro community as well as present.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Six? Where can people find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at Sixdettmar, Sixdettmar. My pinned tweet there tells you all the shows that I do, so you don't need to look around too much for that. And then I will shout out my, not my, but our Patreon. Me and my friend Jennifer Uncle have a Patreon at patreon.com/scanlinemedia. If you want to help us, create things, and also for $1 a month, you can get access to Oops All Anime, which is our anime sampler podcast where we try out different shows. It's a good time. Lots of guests.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this episode. Do we have that? Until next time, test your might.
Bye.
Quidality.